Not every engine makes noise before it explodes. Sometimes this is the most dangerous part in a room full of gears. That morning, no one noticed when an invisible woman walked through the back door and paused for 5 seconds in front of $1 million car. She was just the janitor, right? Just another shadow between polished glass and shining name tags. But what if that shadow saw something no one else did? What if the biggest failure in that room wasn't mechanical, but human? This story begins with a blinking red light and ends with a name the world tried to erase. Don't expect a polished tale with rehearsed speeches and predictable redemption arcs. Here, the turning point starts with a mop and shakes the pillars of power. A woman ignored by everyone is about to challenge the idea that worth is tied to wealth. And everything she carries fits inside a broom, an old scanner, and a rusted brooch. But be careful, sometimes the one cleaning the floor knows what's buried beneath it. And when the system crashes live, who really knows how to fix it? Will anyone dare to finally listen to the one who's always been silenced? Or is it easier to blame her, humiliate her, and pretend she was never there? This story doesn't start with applause. It starts with a sideways glance, a quiet insult, and a cold command. You shouldn't be here. But some people are built to withstand silence until the right moment comes. And when it does, not even the finest suit can hide the fear of being exposed. A room full of investors, a luxury car, and a technical failure no one can explain. Tension builds, time ticks, and from the back, someone holds an old device in shaking hands. Why is she here? And what happens if, just this once, they choose to listen? They say faith is believing without seeing. But what if the warning is blinking right in front of you, and no one wants to look? She didn't shout, didn't beg, just watched. And when she finally spoke, the room froze. Because her voice, though quiet, carried something no degree can teach. Memory, courage, and a wisdom born when pain and dignity walk side by side. This isn't a story about cars. It's a story about scars. About what happens when the past decides to visit the present, uninvited. A woman who once taught thousands was forced to mop the corners of a world that pretends not to remember her. But God never forgets those who sowed in tears. And some days, heaven bends low, just to prove it's still paying attention. The real question is, what happens when this quiet woman is finally heard? And when a powerful man recognizes the face that changed his future, what will he do? The answer will shift more than just a garage. Now stop for a moment. Close your eyes and imagine finding out the janitor in the corner once saved lives with her hands, and that the grease stain everyone mocks hides an invisible medal of wisdom. This story is real, and it won't just move you. It will challenge the way you see people. Because today, the whole world will stop to hear someone who's always spoken softly. And the only question left is, are you ready to listen? But before listening to this exciting story, if you are not yet subscribed to our channel, subscribe now and become part of our community. The soft scrape of a broom leaned against the metal wall went unnoticed, swallowed by the buzz of LED lights and the stiff chatter echoing across the garage. Miss Evelyn walked in the way she always did, short steps, back straight, eyes cast down. No urgency, just quiet dignity in the middle of noise. But something was different that morning. A group of Asian investors toured the bay, cameras flashing, voices unfamiliar. She wasn't there for them. She had only left her broom behind, near the diagnostic station. The air smelled of grease and expensive cologne. She was supposed to be invisible, but then she heard the car. A Lamborghini Miura slid across the floor with an arrogant hum. Lucas, the junior mechanic, was behind the wheel, trying to look confident. Evelyn watched, not out of curiosity, but instinct. Her eyes found the dashboard and froze. A red triangle blinked, faint, but real. It meant electrical failure was near. She didn't panic. She'd seen this before. Her breath slowed, but her heart did not. Lucas smiled for the guests. Evelyn didn't. Chad, the supervisor, was putting on a show. Pointing, laughing, bragging. Evelyn remained at the edge, holding her broom like a relic. Her dark uniform and graying hair made her fade into the backdrop. She was supposed to. That's how the world treated people like her. But she saw the warning. She knew the risk. She stood still. She'd learned long ago that silence, too, has a voice. And sometimes it's louder than shouting. The footsteps came, loud and polished. Chad approached, arms folded like a wall. "Evelyn, we have VIPs today." "You can get that later," he said, eyes not meeting hers. She didn't argue, just nodded. Calm, composed, but her gaze lingered on the car. That blinking light, that faltering sound. She knew the signs, and still. No one asked her anything. She turned to leave. One hand on the broom, the other brushing against the scanner in her pocket. Old, scratched, but trusted. Her fingers curled around it for a moment, then let go. Not yet. No one cared about her tools. No one knew what they meant. The engine behind her trembled. A hint of something wrong. She took a breath and kept walking. Everything sparkled around her: glass walls, chrome finishes, camera lenses. No one noticed her, and yet she saw it all. A system ready to fail. A performance about to collapse. She murmured scripture under her breath. 1,000 may fall at your side. Her steps were measured, her spirit steady. But she knew. Oh, she knew. They'd realize, just not now. The service door stood before her. She gripped the handle. Still time to warn them. Still time to speak. But she didn't. Not her place. Not anymore. She wasn't their teacher now. She was the janitor. She was the silence. She touched the brooch on her chest, an old gear, a gift from a class long gone. "We keep the world moving." That's what it said. But the world didn't want her hands anymore. Behind her, the car coughed. A sound only a mechanic's soul would recognize. She stopped. Closed her eyes. She didn't want to be right. But she was. The red light blinked again, faster, sharper. And no one noticed. She stepped through the door. Her reflection trailed her in the glass. Just a cleaning lady. But her silence. It was about to roar. Asterisk, asterisk. The investor's heels echoed like drums. Across the glass corridor. Chad led the way, his walk rehearsed, his grin camera ready. He pointed to engines like a stage actor, reciting torque stats as if quoting scripture. Evelyn, broom in hand, stayed along the edge like a shadow. She tried to be small and visible, just like they expected. But fate has a way of placing truth in plain sight. The Lamborghini still sat there, now hooked to a diagnostic system. The panel blinked. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't help it. Chad spotted her in the glass reflection, and his smile faltered. He turned slowly, still pretending to be polite, but the poison was already in his voice. "Evelyn, still here?" he said, like she'd broken a rule. Every head turned toward her. Evelyn stopped, hands gripping the broom tight. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Chad went on louder now. "Sweetheart, this is the presentation area, not exactly a spot for cleaning." One of the guests chuckled. Another looked away. Evelyn's feet stayed planted. "Please return to the maintenance wing. We'll call you if we need wax on the hood," Chad added, laughing at his own joke. Evelyn still hadn't spoken. But her silence said everything. Her eyes locked, her spine unbent, and behind that quiet were scars he would never understand. Lucas kept fiddling with the car, unaware. Evelyn looked again at the dashboard, the red triangle still flashing. And now a second warning appeared. The clock was ticking. She turned and walked away. Not in defeat, but in quiet resistance. Every step said, "I saw it." Chad resumed the tour, proud of himself, unaware that his performance was about to collapse. Evelyn crossed the glass threshold like a soldier exiting a battlefield. But before she fully stepped out, she paused. Her reflection stared back. Tired, aged, but inside the fire still burned. That car wouldn't last 2 more minutes, and she knew it. "This system will crash in under 2 minutes." She whispered. No one heard, but her words felt like prophecy, like someone who's seen the ending before the story even begins. She knew that car inside and out, not from books, but from decades of teaching young hands to build the future. Technology changes, but failure speaks the same language. She held her broom like a textbook, and in it, the next chapter was already written. Inside, the conversations went on. Chad praised the car's new system. Lucas smiled but sweat-lined. His brow, the Lamborghini, blinked again. Evelyn, now outside, watched through the glass. She didn't want to shame anyone or claim a stage. She just wanted truth to matter. And truth, in that moment, blinked red. The shop felt colder. Silence pressed against her, like a spring pulled tight. And she knew soon everything would come into focus, even her. One investor asked about the hybrid system. Chad answered confidently, but completely wrong. Evelyn closed her eyes. It wasn't just arrogance, it was ignorance with a microphone. And the world applauded loud voices with empty facts. Evelyn's fingers touched the scanner in her pocket. She breathed deep. Not yet, she told herself. But time was running out. The system and the lies were about to break. Inside, the panel lights blinked harder. A subtle tremor ran through the car. Evelyn felt it not in her body, but in her soul. Her eyes met Lucas's briefly through the glass. He hesitated, as if realizing too late that something was wrong. Evelyn stepped back. Her heartbeat steady, strong. It's now, she thought, but said nothing, because sometimes truth doesn't need a voice. It just needs a moment. The sound came first, a sharp digital hiccup from the dashboard. Then, a low electronic hum, and finally, silence. The Lamborghini stalled in the middle of the garage. The panel went dark like a TV unplugged. Everyone froze. Chad blinked, confused. Lucas frantically pushed buttons. This doesn't make sense. It was fine a minute ago, he shouted, voice cracking. Evelyn, behind the glass, didn't flinch. She just watched, already knowing. The old scanner was now in her right hand. The faint scent of burnt plastic crept into the air, subtle but unmistakable to a seasoned mechanic. Evelyn closed her eyes. It felt like hearing an old student mess up one last time. Chad stepped forward, still trying to hold the act. Probably a loose wire. Lucas, reboot the system. Lucas tried, but nothing responded. The screen stayed black. Tension thickened. Evelyn gripped the scanner like a relic, old, scratched, but accurate. And ready if anyone dared to ask. One guest whispered in Cantonese. The translator hesitated, then said, "She asked if this kind of failure is common here." Chad forced a tight smile. Of course not. Just a minor issue. But his eyes betrayed him. The cameras were still rolling. The $1 million car sat lifeless, a silent monument to failure. Evelyn didn't move. But inside, she felt the truth settle in. Truth doesn't need a stage, it just needs time. Lucas stepped out, sweating. "I checked everything. I swear," he muttered. Chad leaned in. Fake confidence. "Keep smiling," he hissed. But it was already unraveling. The crowd wasn't smiling. Investors whispered. Evelyn, still outside, looked on like a teacher watching a stubborn student. Except now, the cost was higher, and the audience much colder. The scanner buzzed faintly in her hand like it knew. Evelyn inhaled. The moment had come. But she didn't rush. She waited like always. Wisdom doesn't shout, it whispers, her late husband used to say. She believed that. One last blue light blinked on the panel, a death sigh. The system had crashed completely. Only a full reboot could save it. And only someone old school could do that. Chad scrambled. We'll call the German tech team. They'll fix it in seconds. But the words sounded desperate now. One investor folded his arms, clearly annoyed. Another checked his watch. Evelyn walked toward the glass divider. She hadn't crossed it yet, but her presence already disrupted the scene. The scanner in her hand gleamed faintly. She didn't need to prove anything. But she would, if they let her. Lucas looked her way, guilt mixed with a silent plea. Evelyn nodded, not smugly but with quiet strength. Like someone who knows how it feels to fail and still shows up. Chad turned and saw her. Why are you still here? He barked, louder than he should have. Evelyn didn't budge. She took 2 steps forward. This scanner still reads codes your shiny tech can't. Chad laughed, nervous. What, you gonna fix a supercar with a dinosaur from the 90s? Evelyn raised the scanner calmly. If I fix this, will you apologize? She asked, eyes locked on his. The room fell silent, that kind of silence that exposes, that wounds, that demands. Chad hesitated, laughed weakly. You just want attention, don't you? Evelyn didn't answer. She waited. The scanner was ready, and so was she. Sometimes the story needs someone willing to break the script. And Evelyn was never just part of the background. Asterisk, asterisk. The silence after Evelyn's question was thick, heavy, uncomfortable, like fog pressing down. Chad swallowed, eyes darting. Everyone was watching him. The investors waited, some arms crossed, others frowning. Lucas stood still, staring at the floor. Chad took a breath, unable to respond directly. So he did what he always did when cornered. He deflected. Maybe it was just luck. Or maybe you did something, Evelyn. The words came quiet, sharp. And they cut deep. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Evelyn didn't react. Her eyes held steady. But the mood shifted. Lucas looked up, alarmed. She was on the other side of the room, Chad. Chad ignored him. I saw her near the car earlier. That area was restricted, remember? The guests shifted, caught between awkwardness and suspicion. Evelyn gripped the scanner, not defensively, but with purpose. It looked like truth in her hands. Sometimes, truth wears silence. Sabotage is a serious accusation, Mr. Morton, one guest said coldly. The translator softened the tone. Evelyn stayed quiet. She knew this tactic, twist the moment, save your pride. She knew what would come. Fake laughter, planted doubt, veiled exclusion. Chad circled, trying to regain footing. It's just odd, right? An old scanner, a perfect prediction. And then it fails. Too convenient. Evelyn met his eyes with quiet fire. Convenient would be pretending I didn't know what I saw. Lucas stepped forward. She warned me. Said something was off. I didn't listen. Chad snapped. And you trusted the janitor over our systems? Lucas faltered. Evelyn finally spoke, low and calm. He listened to me as a person. Not as a title. Her words hung heavy. One guest clapped softly. Chad paled. His authority, built on volume and appearance, was cracking. But he had one more play. Let her try. If she fails, she's out. Evelyn didn't blink. All right. She walked slowly toward the car. The crowd parted like a silent ritual. The scanner glowed faintly. Maybe it was the light. Maybe it was courage. She knelt carefully, connected the cable to the hidden panel. The system lights flickered. Evelyn typed with calm precision. Her fingers knew the rhythm, like a pianist returning to an old melody. Behind her, no one spoke. Chad crossed his arms. But even silence had changed sides. A series of codes appeared on screen. The system restarted. Evelyn pressed each command with steady hands. The dashboard lit up. Then, the soft, smooth hum of the engine. The car came alive, eyes widened. Lucas covered his mouth. The investors exchanged surprised glances. Chad froze. Evelyn didn't celebrate. She stood, unplugged the scanner, wiped her hands calmly, then faced Chad. "Anything you'd like to say, Mr. Morton?" Chad cleared his throat, searched for dignity. "Found none. You got lucky." Evelyn smiled gently. "Luck is when contempt meets competence." Another guest clapped. Evelyn didn't need applause. But inside something healed. She'd been accused, humiliated, doubted, but never erased. There, in the middle of the garage, she taught again, not with volume, not with pride. Just with presence, skill, and the quiet faith that time reveals all. Lucas stepped forward. "I'm sorry for not listening." Evelyn touched his shoulder softly. "You listened, just took time to believe." In the distance, Chad slipped out the side door. Evelyn looked at the scanner. Then the car. Everything worked again. But what truly worked was her sense of purpose. She wasn't there for nostalgia or paycheck. She was there so someone could finally see that the hands that clean are also hands that build. The engine's hum filled the garage like a sacred anthem. It wasn't just the sound of a Lamborghini coming back to life. It was arrogance collapsing under the weight of skill. Evelyn stood still, the scanner now off in her hands, like someone who had just restored a lost heartbeat. Around her, no one moved. It was as if time held its breath. The car gleamed under the white lights, but something else shined brighter now. Chad looked down, hoping the floor held answers. The visitors exchanged looks. Then, from the back, a voice whispered, "Who is this woman?" The question came from the eldest among the visitors. A man in a gray suit, eyes squinting like trying to place a memory. Benjamin Kai turned and looked. His gaze fell on Evelyn. Something stirred inside, like seeing a photo come to life. Evelyn didn't move. Her expression said everything. Dignified. Silent. Present. Benjamin stepped forward, then again. As if crossing decades with each step, Evelyn waited, patient, steady. He stopped a few feet away. His heart beat like it did in youth. "Miss Brown?" he asked, voice trembling. Evelyn stared for a moment that stretched like years. Then, a faint smile. "Benjamin, you still raise your eyebrow when you lie." The line cracked the silence like lightning. Benjamin chuckled, hand to mouth, eyes damp. "My God, it's you." She nodded simply. But that small gesture held everything. Reunion, memory, gratitude. A seed blooming after years, the room seemed to inhale. One guest asked, "You know her?" Benjamin wiped his eyes and turned. "She was my teacher, 35 years ago." A new silence filled the room, this one full of reverence. Chad took a step back. Evelyn stood tall. "She taught me how to rebuild an engine. But she also taught me not to be ashamed of where I came from." The words landed like a gospel. Benjamin turned to Chad. "She's not a janitor. She's an engineer. One of the best." Evelyn looked away, not from shame, but from modesty. She never needed applause, just respect. Lucas watched, wide-eyed. It was like seeing a legend walk out of the tool closet. The visitors, once distant, now drew closer with genuine awe. One asked to shake her hand. Evelyn hesitated. "My hands are dirty," she said. "Then they're real," the man replied. They all smiled. Her old scanner lay on the workbench like a sacred relic. Today, it was the most valuable tool in the room. Benjamin's eyes still shimmered. "You were the first person who ever believed in me." Evelyn smiled gently. "I didn't believe in you, Benjamin. I saw you. That's different." The words landed like a blessing. He nodded, touched. The boy who'd once been seen beneath poverty, accent, fear, now stood as a man of success before the woman who never looked away. Evelyn stood tall, but her eyes shimmered, holding emotion like a fragile gift. She never stopped being who she was. Chad tried to slip away, but Benjamin caught him. "You accused her?" he asked, calm. Chad stammered. I didn't know who she was." Benjamin gave a half smile. "And that was your biggest mistake." Evelyn stepped forward. "He just said what many think, this time out loud." Chad looked down. Lucas stood beside him, suddenly younger. He'd learned something no manual teaches. Evelyn raised her brooch, the golden gear. Under the garage lights, it shined like truth finally seen. The visitors began to applaud. Slowly, then louder, but Evelyn didn't beam. She nodded as one who's grateful and gets back to work. "If I could, I'd go back to the classroom," she whispered. Benjamin heard her. "The classroom is wherever you are," he replied. Evelyn looked around. For a moment, the garage became a school. People learning without manuals. Hearts waking up without blueprints. She smiled, finally. And as the room fell into quiet again, Benjamin asked, "Have lunch with me today, please?" Evelyn replied with no rush, "Only if there's dessert." Asterisk, asterisk. The restaurant was modern and quiet, all soft wood tones and clean glass lines. Benjamin had reserved a window table overlooking a city that rose between skyscrapers and scars. Evelyn entered slowly, her eyes scanning the room, the precisely folded napkins, the silverware lined like soldiers, the faint rosemary scent drifting from the kitchen. She sat with grace. The room didn't intimidate her. The space between worlds did. "Thank you for the invitation, Benjamin." He smiled, still surprised she had come. "You taught me how to adjust engines, but I never learned how to say thank you properly." The waiter brought lemon water and thick paper menus. Evelyn didn't look at hers. She ordered grilled salmon, like someone who chooses what's familiar. Benjamin watched every gesture with reverence. "When you met me, I was ashamed of everything," he said. "My name, my English, the smell of my mother's clothes." Evelyn looked at him gently, but said nothing. "You never told me I was good. You just made me repeat it until I was." She smiled. "Cause and result never walk alone. I just needed you to see it for yourself." He pulled a small envelope from his pocket. Inside was a folded photo, yellowed and worn. In it, a young Benjamin smiled next to a dismantled engine, Evelyn in the background holding a clipboard. "I've kept this all these years. It was the first time someone looked at me like I could be something." Evelyn ran her fingers over the image. "You already were." Silence followed. They both looked out the window as a school bus passed by. Evelyn unconsciously touched the gear-shaped brooch on her chest. "I still wear this, you know. It reminds me that teaching keeps the world moving." Benjamin pulled out his phone and hit record. "May I?" Evelyn hesitated. "I don't like being on camera." He smiled. "Then let me show them who you are." The camera rolled, but the moment felt private. He spoke like someone finally letting out years of held breath. "This woman taught me more than any degree. She taught me not to quit, to correct with grace, to never look down in shame." Evelyn lowered her gaze. Benjamin went on. "I became an engineer, but she gave me the first real manual." The video went online before dessert even arrived. Evelyn ordered flan. Benjamin just coffee. Within minutes, the comments poured in. "She taught me too. She saved my brother from dropping out. My dad used to talk about her." Evelyn blinked. "People still remember?" Benjamin nodded. "You think the world forgets someone who fixes it from the inside?" She smiled softly, but beneath it, a shadow flickered. "It's hard to accept kindness when life taught you to survive on silence." As they left the restaurant, Evelyn felt her phone vibrate. It was an anonymous message, no name. Just words, "You don't belong in that place. Remember who you are." Attached was a photo of her cleaning the garage floor. Evelyn froze. Benjamin noticed. "What's wrong?" she showed him. He read slowly, then looked at her, firm. "That's not about you. That's fear talking, someone afraid to watch you shine." Evelyn didn't respond, but her eyes filled, not from pain, from old exhaustion. Benjamin gently held her arm. "You saw me when no one else did. Now it's my turn to make sure they see you," Evelyn exhaled. "I'm not looking for a spotlight, Benjamin." He nodded. "I know. But some people need to hear your story so they can remember their own." She didn't reply, but something stirred within. A quiet yearning to teach again, not in a classroom, but in every gesture, in every memory still echoing through the city streets. Maybe there was still time. The next morning, Evelyn heard a knock. She was in her usual jumpsuit, eyes heavy from a restless night. She opened the door. Benjamin stood there, an envelope in hand. "Someone's trying to silence you, but I have an idea." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "And what would that be?" He smiled. "You gave me a classroom. Now I want to give you a microphone." Evelyn didn't answer right away. She stepped aside, let him in, and set the kettle to boil. It was late afternoon when Benjamin posted the full video. No edits, no music, no polish. Just him and Evelyn, side by side at the table, with the past sitting quietly between them. Within an hour, it had thousands of views. Emotional comments poured in from former students, parents, colleagues. "This woman taught me to believe in myself. She held my hand when I wanted to quit." Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't even open the notifications. She spent the rest of the day in silence, organizing her tools like someone reorganizing memories. The next morning, Benjamin picked her up early. Said he had something planned. Evelyn hesitated. "I don't like stages," but she went anyway. The event was simple, a visit to the school where it all began. When they arrived, the faded paint still clung to the walls. But something had changed. A group of students, teachers, and staff waited at the entrance. In the center, a handmade sign. "Welcome back, Miss Brown." Evelyn stopped, eyes misty. Not from surprise, but because the world was finally facing her head-on. The principal walked them through the halls. The walls had fresh coats of paint, but the scent of oil and metal remained. Evelyn ran her hand along the tiles like she was touching her own story. They stopped at the mechanical shop, now called the Evelyn Brown Workshop. A stainless steel plaque on the door bore her name. Evelyn said nothing, but her fingers tightened around the brooch on her chest. That gear had never felt so heavy. It was as if the past whispered in her ear, "You did right." Inside, students had gathered to watch a live broadcast. Benjamin was set to speak about his career and a new technical mentorship program. But when he entered, he changed everything. He called Evelyn to the front. "I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk about the woman who taught me to lift my head." Evelyn tried to step back, but he gently held her hand. The broadcast began, cameras on, lights up, and in the middle of it all, her. A woman with lowered eyes, marked hands, and a presence that filled the room without a sound. Benjamin told stories no one else knew. How he used to pretend he had lunch just to avoid shame. How Evelyn would quietly hand him a sandwich wrapped in napkin, no words spoken. "She taught me that dignity isn't given, it's planted." Through small acts, the room fell silent. Evelyn looked down, not to avoid attention, but to stay grounded. Her image, broadcast live, now reached thousands. Teachers applauded. From afar, students whispered, "That's her, the scanner lady." But to Benjamin, she was far more. She was the root of who he became. Across the city, Chad watched the stream from his office. Each sentence from Benjamin chipped at his pride. "She taught me not to be ashamed of my roots. She showed me mistakes don't define me. She taught me how to listen in silence. The words hit like hammers. Chad stood up, walked to the window, and stared at the street. For the first time, he wondered what it felt like to be invisible. He thought about what he had done, and for the first time, he felt ashamed. Evelyn's silence now echoed inside him like thunder. Back at the school, the stream ended with a standing ovation. Evelyn didn't cry, but her eyes glistened. Benjamin squeezed her hand gently. "There's one more place I want to show you." She nodded. They walked to the back of the building. There, a group of recent graduates waited, new uniforms, fresh toolboxes. "This is our new mentorship program, and I want you to be our ambassador." Evelyn took a deep breath. "But I'm just a janitor, Benjamin." He smiled. "That's exactly why. Because the world still needs to learn." Evelyn looked into the young faces before her. She saw in them the spark she'd once seen in her own students. "If I can teach you one thing, it's this. Listen to silence. It says what shouting hides." The students nodded. And in that moment, Evelyn understood. It wasn't about returning to what was. It was about transforming the now. With the same eyes, the same hands, the same quiet faith. She touched the brooch on her chest and smiled. The gear glinted in the morning sun, as if the world had finally learned how to hear what she never had to say aloud. The restaurant was smaller this time, warm, homey, with creaking chairs and the smell of fresh herbs in the air. Evelyn and Benjamin picked a table in the back, away from curious eyes. She still looked uneasy about the recent attention. "I'm more known for that scanner now than for 30 years of teaching," she muttered, stirring her tea. Benjamin chuckled. "The world only listens when there's a picture. But what you did was always visible to those willing to see." Evelyn lifted her eyes. "The problem is, not everyone wants to look." Then she returned to her glass as if hiding truths inside the water. During lunch, Benjamin excused himself. He turned on his phone, recorded again. This time, it was just him. "I want to speak to the young people studying right now, the ones who think they don't matter." He told Evelyn's story unscripted. The paper-wrapped lunches, the well-timed lessons, the brooch on her chest. This woman doesn't have a platform or followers, but she has scars, and each one taught someone how to keep going. Evelyn, across the table, pretended not to listen, but her eyes gave her away. Every word landed softly. The video, spread in hours, shared by colleges, nonprofits, news outlets. Evelyn received invitations for talks, awards, interviews. She declined them all. "I'm not good with microphones." Never was. But something inside her had begun to stir. Like silence, Long, her companion, was being invited to speak. Benjamin pressed gently. "You don't have to give speeches. Just keep being yourself." Evelyn nodded softly. That's how she'd always taught. No spotlight, no vanity, only truth. That evening, Evelyn returned home. Sat by the window in her armchair, the old scanner resting in her lap. The late sun bathed the rug in gold. For a moment, she allowed herself to smile. Then her phone buzzed. An anonymous message. No name, just words. "You don't belong in that place. Remember who you are." Attached was an old photo, her kneeling, cleaning the garage floor. Evelyn froze, her breath caught. The scanner slipped from her lap, hitting the floor with a dull thud. It was like the past trying to grab her by the ankle. She picked up the phone with trembling hands, looked at the image again. The shadow in her eyes, frozen in that photo, felt crueler than the grime on the ground. Evelyn pressed her lips, holding back tears. The scanner, the picture, all reminders that the world often resents those who escape the place it built to contain them. "Remember who you are," the message said, but Evelyn knew. More than ever, and maybe that's what scared them. Because she hadn't forgotten. She was just beginning to show it. The next morning before sunrise, someone knocked. Evelyn was still in her nightgown, hair pinned up in loose clips. She opened the door slowly. Benjamin stood there, wearing a dark jacket, eyes steady. "I got the same photo, same message." Evelyn nodded. She didn't ask who or why, just pointed toward the kettle on the stove. He came in, sat down. For a while neither of them spoke. Only the sound of the water warming filled the room. They both knew this wasn't a threat, it was a reaction to who she'd become. Benjamin placed an envelope on the table. "I have a plan." Evelyn didn't respond. He continued, "We'll turn all of this into a national project. Mentorships, scholarships, workshops. You'll name the program." She raised an eyebrow. "And who's gonna listen to a janitor?" Benjamin smiled. Calmly, the woman who rebooted a supercar with a vintage scanner. "Plenty of people." Evelyn crossed her arms. The kettle whistled. She stood, turned off the flame, poured the tea. "Fine, but I do it my way." He raised his mug in agreement. "Your way has always been the right one." Later that day, Evelyn sat on the porch with an old notebook. She wrote 3 words, Project Living Gear. Looked up at the orange sky, breathed deeply. This wasn't about fame. It was about endurance. About what stays after the noise fades. About the hands that fix, the voices that heal, the quiet gestures that teach. She smiled, picked up the scanner from the floor, and gently cleaned it. Then placed it back in its case, like guarding treasure. The world wanted her silent. But that day, Evelyn Brown chose to continue, and with voice. The school was packed that morning. Microphones lined the corners, cameras stood on tripods, and banners hung overhead with quotes about education and perseverance. Evelyn arrived beside Benjamin, wearing her usual navy blue jumpsuit, pressed. Spotless, with her gear-shaped brooch pinned to her chest. "This wasn't necessary," she whispered, glancing around. Benjamin smiled. "You've spent your whole life hiding. Today's the day you're seen." Evelyn didn't reply. But her steps were slow, almost ceremonial. The auditorium fell. Completely silent as she entered. And without a word, her presence filled the space like a quiet prayer. The ceremony began with brief speeches. The state education secretary spoke about quiet merit. A coordinator recalled the first time she saw Evelyn teach carburetor function using an apple. Evelyn, seated in the front row, simply observed. It was like watching her life narrated by others. Then the host stepped onto the stage, and the air shifted. "Today, we have a surprise not listed in the program. A recognition that crossed borders." He lifted a gold folder. "Evelyn Brown's name has just been approved to join the National Technical Education Council." The audience rose to its feet in applause. Evelyn stayed seated. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. She couldn't believe it. Benjamin touched her arm. "It's real." Evelyn brought her hand to her mouth, then to her brooch. Tears rolled silently. She stood slowly, not from weakness, but from emotional weight. She stepped up to the stage, grasped the microphone with both hands. I didn't think I'd live to see something like this." Then fell quiet. Another wave of applause. But the silence that followed spoke louder. As she struggled to speak, a woman in the back stood up. She wore a gray blazer and understated glasses. Her voice trembled. "You taught me 30 years ago and saved my life when no one believed in me." Evelyn's eyes widened. She knew that voice. "Tanya?" she asked. The woman stepped forward. "I was just another invisible student. Until you handed me a book and said, 'You're not a mess, you're a blueprint no one bothered to read.'" The room fell into hushed awe. Evelyn covered her mouth, overcome. Tanya took a breath. "Today, I'm the Deputy Secretary of Technical Education in this state, and I owe it to you." She pulled a worn note from her pocket. Evelyn's old handwriting, fast and flawed. You told me that even without applause, it was worth continuing. Evelyn looked at the note. Eyes full. I remember this. I wrote it after a rough class. I didn't think it would change anything. Tanya smiled. It changed my story. And for a moment, the entire auditorium seemed to collapse into the embrace between teacher and student. The cameras caught every second, but no lens could capture what stirred inside. Evelyn, arms around her former student, felt the wheel of time turning. That shy girl, overlooked and dismissed, now spoke for an entire system and gave credit to the woman the world had tried to erase. As they stepped apart, Tanya handed Evelyn a small box, a gift, to keep beside your scanner. Inside was a miniature gear, cast in aged gold. Evelyn held it gently. We plant, thinking we'll never see the bloom. The host asked for quiet, then made the final announcement. Starting today, the National Mentorship Program will be called Living Gear in honor of Evelyn Brown. The audience stood again in applause, but Evelyn now was no longer shy. She breathed easily. Her eyes scanned the young people before her, not by name, but by promise, by silence, by journey. She stepped to the mic one last time. The education that shaped me never shouted. It waited for the right moment to be heard, then left the stage with the grace of someone who carries much, but no longer carries it alone. Hours later, Evelyn returned to the school through the side entrance. She just wanted to walk the old halls alone. She stopped at the main mural, where alumni photos lined the wall. But something made her pause. Beside Benjamin's photo there was a new image, a younger Evelyn, smiling, covered in grease, clipboard in hand. Above it, in gold letters, Evelyn Brown, the woman who taught engines to dream. She stood there for a long time, silent, not from shyness, but because sometimes the deepest recognition comes when your soul is finally ready to forgive the whole world. Asterisk. The morning of the new Technical Wings inauguration broke with clear skies and a soft breeze. Evelyn arrived early, before the guests, before the cameras. She walked through the school courtyard like someone entering sacred ground. The worn concrete still held the footsteps of past decades. The mural in the hallway no longer surprised her, but it still moved her. Inside the new building, youthful voices, laughter, and the scent of fresh oil filled the air. A banner hung proudly, Evelyn Brown Center for Technical Excellence. She paused, touched the cloth gently, and whispered, "This is more than I ever asked for, Lord." The ceremony was simple, just as she requested. Short speeches, former students in attendance, tools displayed like relics. The brooch on. Her chest glinted in the morning sun. Evelyn's expression remained calm. When handed the microphone, she took a deep breath. Many think teaching is about speaking loudly. But God taught me to teach in silence, with example, with firmness, with faith. The crowd went still. It wasn't about religion. It was about meaning. About someone who lived every lesson before ever speaking it. She handed back the mic, walked to the students in the back, and greeted each one, eye to eye, as she always had. Benjamin stood among the guests, next to Tanya. Both smiled with the quiet pride of grateful children. Evelyn looked at them with warmth. "You are the harvest. And no harvest comes without knees to the ground." Tanya nodded. Benjamin pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside, an old, rusted shirt button. "It's from my school uniform. I kept it. I remembered you sewed it back on in the restroom when it popped off." Evelyn laughed. "We didn't just stitch that button back, did we?" Everyone laughed gently. There was no past or future in that moment, just now, and it was full of healing. After the ceremony, Evelyn walked to the new workshop. It was bright, clean, filled with modern tools. But what caught her eye was a small workbench in the corner. On it, a plaque read, "Here sat Miss Brown, who made even bolts learn something. Beside it, an old wooden chair, carefully restored. Evelyn sat down, closed her eyes. The room filled with voices only she could hear, student laughter. The clink of tools, the hum of memory, tears welled. But this time, they didn't hurt. She pulled the scanner from its case, ran her fingers across it like a sacred heirloom, then gently placed it on the bench beside the plaque. "You've done your job, old friend." She closed the case, smiled. As she left the workshop, a group of young children walked by on a school tour. One of them asked, "Do you work here?" "Ma'am?" Evelyn stopped, looked him in the eyes, and said gently, "More than that, sweetheart. I belong here." The boy smiled, and Evelyn walked on. But something inside her felt like it was floating. That evening, she returned home alone, put on her familiar apron, brewed fresh coffee, straightened the books on the table, cleaned the windows, watered her plants. No cameras, no clapping. And yet, there was fullness in every act. She sat down and opened an old notebook of scribbled thoughts and lesson plans. On one page, she read, "When no one sees, God sees." She leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and gave thanks for not being forgotten, for standing her ground, for never letting silence erase her name. That Sunday, Evelyn went to church, as she had since childhood, sat on the last pew, Bible in hand. When the pastor asked for prayer over educators, a young man stood. "There's a woman here who was my teacher, and God used her to save me from abandonment." Evelyn bowed her head. She didn't want applause. She just wanted the word. But in that moment, an older woman beside her gently touched her arm. "You're the woman with the gear, aren't you?" Evelyn nodded with a soft smile. The woman whispered, "Then God chose the right hand." Leaving the church, Evelyn walked alone down a cobblestone street. The wind played with loose strands of hair, but she walked steady. Her brooch shimmered on her chest. It was no longer just a symbol. It was part of who she'd become. At home, she hung up her apron, slipped off her shoes, and sat on the porch. The sky was painted orange, and for the first time in a long while, she felt light. The road had been long, but her hands weren't empty. They were full of marks, and those marks were proof. Because when no one expected her, God chose the right hand. She never asked for recognition. She didn't shout, didn't demand, didn't expect applause. She simply walked with the same quiet dignity she always carried, even when the world forgot her. But that day, the world remembered. Miss Evelyn didn't just fix a car. She repaired a broken idea of who deserves to be heard. With an old scanner and a living memory, she proved that wisdom doesn't fade with age. That scars don't mean you're broken. They mean you've been forged. And that silent faith can build foundations where pride only crumbles. How many times have we ignored quiet voices, thinking wisdom has to be loud? How many doors have we shut on those who simply wanted to help, to listen, to guide? Miss Evelyn wasn't just part of the background, she was the foundation, and it took decades for someone to see it. Still, she forgave before she was praised. She smiled before she was remembered. And maybe that's the hardest lesson of all, to keep your soul steady while everything around you tries to erase you. She did. Today, her name shines on golden plaques. But her true legacy isn't in metal, it's in the hands she taught. To think, in the young lives that dared to dream again because one quiet woman chose to stand tall. It's in the gears still turning because someone once believed in the impossible. Her students are now leaders, engineers, public officials. But they still call her Miss Brown. Because titles may change, but the respect born from truth, that can't be bought. And that's what she left behind, a living, humble, unshakable truth. How many Miss Evelyns are out there? Invisible, enduring in silence? How many are waiting for the world to slow down long enough to hear them? Would you have noticed that woman in the corner of the room? Would I? Maybe we're too busy admiring the shine and forget to look at the foundation. Maybe it's time to change that. Because wisdom doesn't wear a name tag or a title or need a spotlight. It just needs someone willing to listen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel, turn on the notifications, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the world is full of silenced voices, hidden talents, and faith stitched into the quiet. And sometimes, all a life needs is to be seen as it truly is, essential. Miss Evelyn showed us that you don't have to shout to transform the world. You just need to stand firm. Even when the floor feels slippery, you just need to carry your faith. Even if it fits in an old rusted brooch, you just need to remember who you are. Even when everyone tries to erase your name, and then, one day, the world stops and finally listens.